I'm DJ.
And I'm Major.
Welcome to One Shot Saturday,
a TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. And today we are talking more Zine Month. It's been quite an amazing February so far, and we're going to be talking to creators launching crowdfunding projects all month long. And today with us are game designers Ethan Yen and James Quigley and their project Prequel. Thank you guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Let's start where I like to start for most people doing Zine Month stuff. Is this y'all's first Zine Quest, Zine Month experience, or is this something that you've done a couple times over?
I believe this is Ethan's first time, and this is my third time running a Zine Quest project.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, this is a second for both DJ and I, and it is becoming my new holiday. Like, I absolutely love February now. It's got so many fun things.
Yeah, and the community and stuff too around the Zine Month thing is like everybody coming together and being like, here, let me throw some money your way. And you throw money our way, and all of a sudden you get the bill at the end of the month and you're like, I spent $400 on different books and
I'll see them in a year.
Yeah. At a staggered rate of delivery.
You're right. Yeah.
Little presents that
nice.
You forgot about.
There's
It's
nothing
great.
better
It's
than,
like, you get gifts from yourself all year long.
Exactly.
It's great.
You open up the door and you're like, oh, what did I order? And then you open it up and you're like,
forget.
oh, yeah, that's right. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, man. Well, I want to jump in and say, like, right at the top, your project Prequel jumped off the page. You know, the art that you guys have for your project is stunning. Very killer work from your artist there. What was their name? I know I had it written somewhere.
Yeah, it was our cover was done by Carly AF. She does a lot of art illustration work, both in our industry, TTRPGs, as well as just traditional publishing.
Yeah, it's so killer. James, why don't you tell me a little bit about your process of getting into publishing, and then more recently just working on Prequel and getting this project up?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a digital and I'm a tabletop game designer. Very recently I was in university and, pursuing very traditionally for game development. And during that time I was pretty much buckled down on digital games first because I wanted a salary to start myself off after college. At no marker against tabletop. I love it with all my heart. I was kind of doing some small tabletop stuff. And then, when I first caught wind of Zine Quest, I thought, as someone who, likes the idea of self-publishing and publishing in tabletop down the road, I thought this is a great first experience, especially as a broke college student who couldn't afford to, make anything expenses wise. I'm like, so I can make a very small project and put it up, and then all of the money I potentially need for it is going to get given to me. Sign me up.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
And
it's such a good onboarding.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, you learn everything you need to know about publishing. Right, you're like, okay, so this is the cost, this is what it takes to market it, this is the contacts and stuff that I need, and then if you do it all right, there's you make a little money on the end of it, you have books to sell, and you are a TTRPG published author. And what we've kind of experienced and what we've seen from other long time Zine Quest people or people who crowdfund often is that the more you do it, right, the more of a following you build up with it and the more successful you become with it.
It's, it's one of those things where you hear with authors, it's like you need 20 books that are published to be making a $30,000 a year salary. And I'm like, that's insane. But might as well work in that direction. That's so cool. So you got involved. What was your first Zine Month year, James?
Pretty sure that would be 2021.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
You're asking him to date himself, Andrew.
There you go. Yeah. How old are you?
Not
No,
much today.
I went through a fairly traditional route in terms of indie TTRPGs. I started with Dungeons and Dragons, and I started writing for that in 2019. Indie publishing, just putting out my own adventures, and I started freelancing as well for conventions and other small publishers at that time. I still do freelance work, and then it wasn't until 2021-ish that I opened my horizons in the tabletop role-playing game arena to indie games, and so that really opened my eyes to what could be done, or what can't be done, what can't be
Right.
done in tabletop, and so that's when I started delving into designing my own games, away from established systems. So I've been, independently publishing my own games since that.
All right, so today we're talking about Prequel, and I know a little bit of the background on it, but why don't you guys give me the elevator pitch?
All right, so Prequel is a tactical storytelling game of heroic sacrifice. So you play as the first heroes who take on this overwhelming evil that has beset the realm. You've gone through this really arduous quest to get here. You've made it to the final fight. This is it. You start fighting, and you realize very quickly that, oh no, we are sorely unprepared for this battle. The evil just cannot be defeated. You're the first ones to try this out, and you realize like there's just certain things that you just did not bring to this fight that are required. And so this battle quickly turns from how do we save the world to how do we reveal the weaknesses of the evil and preserve them for the next generation of heroes before we all die out. And simultaneously, while you're doing this tactical fight, you're doing these flashbacks to this more like storytelling, world building, history building portion of the game where you're recalling aspects of the quest and building out the world so that you've told this narrative that when you're done with the game, you'll have told the story of these heroes who sacrificed everything for the chance that the next generation may have a chance for success, and sets you up for a long-term campaign if you wish.
That's so cool. I mean, like starting out with a narrative conceit of like, you're all basically doomed, you will lose, but you are setting it up. Like, I don't know, I think about so many like legendary items or relics that are in all these TTRPGs that we play. And they always have that epic backstory of like when they went up against the great evil, but that, the wielder fell, or maybe they didn't, or maybe they hid it in a tomb full of traps and whatever. I don't think I've seen a game all about diving into that history. So this is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, literally all those things you mentioned, you can do in Prequel. Yeah, you can be that weapon, you can hide that artifact, you can create that Chosen One prophecy. This game gives you the tools to do that.
For the listeners, the project is funded currently.
Congratulations.
But, congratulations.
Thank you.
If you had the unlimited budget for this game, because I know we all think about it. We're all publishers here. We've all written things, and we've all dreamt so far outside of the scope of what we're
we could do
on
sometimes.
doing. If you had the unlimited budget, what would you do with the excess for a Prequel?
I know something that I've personally dreamed of, which as a pipe dream is I would really like getting art that one is animated, that you can like, and then two, getting a voice actor or two to basically pre-record some like villain monologues that kind of go along with the game.
That'd be sweet.
That'd be like pipe dream for me.
You guys have some stretch goals too that in this unlimited scenario would all be rolled in. So
right,
these are like the extra stretch of like what if the stuff DJ's trying to tempt you with that it could potentially kill your project.
It's the dream.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely the scope dreamer, and Ethan is the conservative voice,
pragmatist, the realist.
If you have an idea during Zine Quest, no, you didn't. Like, no, you didn't. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, I'm a
man.
big proponent of designing small games that have contained experiences.
Yeah.
Prequel is a very focused game that aims to give you a certain experience. Though on the flip side of that, I also strongly believe that tabletop games have a huge barrier to entry for new people. Like you hand them this book and say, read this. And then they're like, what am I looking at? What am I supposed to do? And so
everybody need to read it, just me.
right. Yeah.
Like...
And there was a podcast I was listening to with Banana Chan, and they had mentioned like a very strong belief of the closer you can get your TTRPG to look like a board game on the shelf, the more it's gonna sell. And so, my pipe dream is always like the closer I can get to a board game, the better. Whereas like the indie side, practical side of me is like, it's real easy to just print a zine.
Yep.
The moment you start bringing in like dice and like other physical things, you're like, it's gonna be a nightmare to fulfill. But if to answer your question, DJ, is the closer we could get this to a board game. So I'm thinking like heavier card stock, like actual pre-made hero sheets. The way we have it set up is you pick an origin and a calling, and you just mix and match.
Yeah,
it's all printable. But if you had those in like a heavy card stock, nice paper. That would definitely, I think, elevate the experience.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny, you mentioned that the closer you get to a board game, the better it sells. It's for multiple reasons, right? Because when you associate a board game, you're associating it with I can pick this up and we can be playing within an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you start to throw in like, oh, we've got nice card stock, we've got little nice cardboard minis and all of that, it starts to feel like a board game, but it also starts to feel like, oh, okay, I can pick this up really quickly.
Yeah.
Which is a lie we tell ourselves every time we pick up a board game.
Yeah, absolutely,
exactly.
it is.
Oh my gosh. Like,
let's
just pick up Twilight Imperium. That'll go quick.
Yeah.
Oh,
half the time you get through the tutorial and you're like, well, it's about time for us to get going.
Yeah. You play Wingspan and you're done and you're like, now I understand how to play. Can we play again?
Yeah.
Well, like, I'm looking at, even in working on my game right now, I'm like, I want to create a more tutorialized experience in game design. Like, you think about getting into so many video games, right? They have to tutorialize the experience, or it's just like, here, read this button map layout of like what you need to memorize. And like, that's rarely, intuitive or accessible for people. But like my premier example of seeing this in action was when we played the Zone for the first time, which, if you're not familiar with, incredible game. And it was so tutorialized. We didn't have to read all of these books in advance. It was very step by step. You would work through the section, you'd play it out at the table, and you'd go on to the next. And I'm just like so craving games that have that level of accessibility in play, because like the reality is so many of these indie games that we're creating are used in, one shot, two shot, three shot kind of stuff. They're not necessarily like the year-long campaigns. And I think that accessibility of just being able to pick up and play without having to have any system mastery really tied to it is key. So yeah, let's dig in more about Prequel. I want to know when the idea started and how you two got connected, and essentially the inception of the game.
So I came up with the idea of Prequel way back, and like, not way back, but like it was 2021-ish, 2022-ish. And so I had the core premise in my head. You're gonna play as the heroes, they're gonna die, and you're gonna create this legacy that you can use for long-term campaigns. The issue was it was just an idea that was in my game idea list on my phone, and I hadn't quite found a system that felt right for it. And that didn't happen until Spencer Campbell's Hunt came out, and it has a fairly similar narrative, right? You're a bunch of knights of a doomed order that are going off to fight this beast. And so I thought, the Lumen system would be a pretty easy system to pick up and learn, and Hunt has proven you can kind of tell those narratives. So I started with that as the framework. And it was around then I started posting devlogs of my journey through Prequel, and over social media. James had reached out, and it was like a 1 or 2 post interaction. He commented something on my post, I replied, and that was kind of our first interaction. There's just a name on the screen, and it wasn't until Big Bad Con 2023, I think, that James had introduced himself. It was very quickly. We were both at the con. And he said, "Hi, I'm that person that commented about Prequel. I think it's pretty cool." And I was like, "Oh, cool. That's like nice to meet someone in person, right? That you've been interacting with digitally." And it was after that convention when I realized, I'm kind of stuck on how I want to take Prequel, that next direction through design. And I'm a big fan of collaboration. I like working with multiple people. It's a great way of bouncing off ideas, and you're going to come up with something a lot better than what you came out working alone. And so I asked James if he'd be willing to, and graciously he said he'd be happy to join as a co-creator. And so since then we've been working on Prequel, and this is the culmination of that.
So this started then about 2 years ago, like as you two working together on it.
Yeah, it feels. Yeah, 2 years seems like such a long time. But
Yeah,
I guess
what's
we had been working on it.
Post-
Well,
COVID
yeah,
2
we
years
just
means
started
nothing.
2025.
Yeah,
so-
what's it called? Well, what's like introductions and like meeting each other end of 2023, and then all focus development has definitely been like the past year.
Yeah.
But I mean, be coming from like the marker that like even probably doesn't realize, but like that, like 2023 is like the first time I started interacting with anybody in the tabletop space, like where like I had just gotten hired, and now I'm like, okay, now I can put some effort towards tabletop. So when I said hi to Ethan, it's like, oh god, somebody I know out of anybody at a convention. And so, which is why I was, super gracious for the opportunity to work with somebody.
Kind of similar for us with like interacting with the community, right? Is we went to Gen Con 2023 as just us hanging out to go to Gen Con. It was just, group friend trip. It was great. We were not really even considering professionality within the industry. And then like we went to Spencer's booth because Andrew was like, I've been really loving these games, and picked up Hunt and a few other things. And Spencer was like, listen, what you got to do is you got to release a book for Zine Quest or Zine Month. And we're like, yeah, we could do that. I forgot. I had completely forgotten about that. Hey, even having the conversation. I have ADHD. Object permanence isn't a thing for me. And then about pretty early, midway through January, Andrew's like, "Do you got your idea together for Zine Quest?" And I was like, "Yeah,
yes, definitely,
obviously, launch fund. Oh, all right, here it goes." And then all of a sudden, we find ourselves as professionals in a space. It gets easier to talk to people when you have something to talk about. And it makes those conventions so much more fun.
It's been really cool just like jumping into the deep end with a lot of other people around the same time, and seeing so many of these creators pop up, and then getting to connect at conventions and whatnot. And I've seen Spencer at conventions like 3 times now, and every time I'm like, hey, by the way, this is your fault. This is all your fault. But no, Spencer's incredible. I mean, he was super generous with his time recently, even when it came to like his office hours stuff that he was doing in the community. And there's just so many people like that, that are just ready to like share and pull other people up. So, all right. So back to Prequel. So we've got the backstory for y'all, the prequel, if you will, for y'all, getting up to developing the game, but in the last year, really focusing in and taking Lumen, the kind of approach-based system that Spencer designed, and developing, your own thing on top of it. I am an arrogant person that doesn't hack systems because I think I have a great new idea. What's it like? No, what's it like hacking it, with Lumen and building something on top of it? What's the development process been like getting into that and then making this kind of stand on its own apart from the inspirations that it's had from Hunt and other stuff?
Hacking systems are great, especially if you're a new designer because you're working off of a proven template. Um, I'll say something that someone had told me in the industry that that they work for a very well-known indie publisher and they receive a lot of pitches. And the thing that he had told me was that if you're hacking a system, don't treat it as a sacred cow, right? Keep only what serves your design goal and don't be afraid to cast off the things that just aren't working for you. And so for us, we had started development with a very similar framework to Hunt, where you have the quest and then you have the final fight. And it's this, traditional framework of like a free form into tactical combat. And then we quickly got that thought of, well, really the experience we're trying to sell is the final fight.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's get rid of that quest up to that point and just
Get right to the
play.
action.
Let's get right to the action, right?
Yeah.
Let's get to the final fight. Which, means that we took a lot of like the Lumen approach-based system isn't really fed into a narrative freeform roleplay system. It feeds in a different way into the tactics and the storytelling. So that took some reconfiguring. But when we did that, it asks other questions, right? Like, well, now we need a way to establish context for the fight. And that's where we bring in those world building elements that we drew heavily from Ben Robbins' Microscope.
Yeah, that's a common theme around these
Yes,
parts.
it is. So
Among
with,
like minds.
yeah. So with this, you started off, you're in the final fight. The final fight's kind of the overarching tie together for the entire thing. And then you're having these flashbacks to establish like lore and stuff for the final fight. See, that's great. That's fantastic.
So cool.
It feels like almost like a really climactic anime episode.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
You got Monkey D. Luffy and he's fighting, and then all of a sudden, flashback to the villain's origin, flashback to, some relevant piece of information.
Or it's like
great.
the mid-season like flashback episode
Yeah.
to the prequel lore drop, like it's just like it's like we're doing this story and then you're like, but why is any of this happening? It's like it's these idiots. These idiots are why it's like this. Yeah. No, I'm fascinated by the ways that I'm seeing other people playing with the microscope idea. And, obviously flashbacks being a big part of my project too. It's just like when you throw away the construct that we are only playing through like linear time at the table and you realize you can just do other stuff with it, it gets really crazy and really fun. Like not to rant about a session I just had, but like last week there was somebody at the table like pushed it even further than I thought because we're doing all these flashbacks and stuff. And we end up basically like one person wanders off out of camp and then we had to go rescue them. And the player was like, hey, like rather than choosing a character and go after that person, what if I just played out what happened to them at the same time as we are catching up to them and in finding their trail? And I'm just like, you just broke my brain. That is the coolest thing ever. And it was so cool, because we'd get up to this point and I'd be like, okay, you're going to have a little encounter, and they'd roll or whatever. And we'd find out they failed a roll. And then I would turn to the other player and be like, okay, what do you find on the ground? They just failed their roll. So you find some evidence of that failure. And so we're like split screen jumping through time. And it was just, it even further unlocked that ability to tell stories out of order in a way that I just really haven't had at the table. And it felt freeing. It felt full. It felt more real, even though we live in a linear order.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really curious as to how you married some of that kind of free form flashback stuff with the mechanics. So what does that more practically look like in the system?
we really divided the line like half and half between basically like a more traditional like tactical combat that won't feel very familiar to if you've played more gamey style TTRPGs like D&D or Pathfinder, where you're doing things on a grid, you're doing damage, you have abilities, and then after you do resolve the combat part of your ability, like there is a attached prompt that then takes you basically over to the world building portion, and you add components, you add a new event to the timeline, and so you are kind of going through this flow of do a little bit of combat, progress that, add something new to the timeline. And I think like the main challenge with Prequel has been, hey, how do we make those things not feel dissonant to each other, make them feel like have good synergy and be reinforcing, so that, hey, everything I'm doing, all the energy I'm putting into the world building is making, the combat progress in ways, and everything I'm doing in the combat is making the world building progress in some ways.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because whenever you tack on something that feels like a subsystem and it actively feels like a subsystem, you get that like, that like lurch, like in the flow of combat or the flow of drama or whatever. And I'm really interested to see how that shakes out the table, because like I mean, as a designer, those are the scary moments of like, I don't want to ruin whatever fun you're having by you having to engage with the system in a weird way. That's fascinating. So, when it comes to the flashbacks, is it run like a scene from Microscope, or what does that more practically look like in the mechanical sense?
Yeah, so it's not a scene. So one thing that we quickly learned, right, is tactical combat goes fast, right?
Yeah.
Like boom, 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 boom. Storytelling, not so much, right? We like to live in the world building. You give 4 world builders a room and they won't come out forever. And so we were very conscious about that. So we said no scenes. It's more of that one level up where you're creating ages basically in Microscope.
Okay. Yeah.
We take that where it's like what you say goes, and we're gonna move on. With the power of it being a timeline that you can present things non-chronologically, like you can always address the issue, the event elsewhere in it. And so we have a lot of guidance, not a lot of guidance, but we have guidance in the rules of like, hey, when you create an event, right, just focus on what are the players, where is it going to be at, and like answer the prompt, and then we'll move on. And so we don't really play too much in the like, let's start role playing as much. There is one of the chapters which lets you do a little more role playing during the period of respite and rest. But yeah, how we try to address that is like establish the event, and then we're gonna move on.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. I kind of found in what we're just saying about like wanting to respect the flow, the way I was doing flashbacks initially was just a hair too jarring. And so like there was essentially that similar flaw being addressed, in that like we still have the ability to go deep into a flashback in the very Microscope way of answering a question and playing to find out, but we also have like an altered version that's just, again, one step up of like more establishing and allowing you to succinctly answer some questions and move forward without slowing stuff down. Because like if we have to spend 10 minutes in a flashback, we forget what our current moment is. So that's I like that you're operating on that different level.
And something that's always really nice is like with that Microscope inspiration, the flashback inspiration and stuff, the engagement that you do get from the players, even when you have to limit a scene, the ownership they have of the world is just increased so much. And I find that they will take you places that you never imagined the story going. And there's just something beautiful about that, especially taking it and putting it in really any game. And increases the quality. And as the game master, because I game master all the time, 8 times a week, having something like that to listen to and refresh, I'm just like, oh, this is great. Please keep telling me stories. I want to hear everything you have to say. Also, it's cutting down on the amount of work I'm having to do, so that's great.
I think one of like the big differences we have from Microscope, because like Microscope can it can feel pretty broad and open, and like you do some work to like set some constraints and like set your yeses and nos. But I think like the big constraint we have in Prequel, outside of just like, hey, we're playing for this premise, is that everything is coming off of a prompt, which is coming off of an ability, which is coming off of like an archetype. So like we have we have like a class called the Sharpshooter, right? Which is very much that like ranger, like long range shot. And the Sharpshooter has a lot of prompts around stuff like identifying a target, like finding a weakness, finding like a way in. So if you're playing the Sharpshooter, you're doing a lot of world building and you're creating events with like a very specific flavor. That's why we also have like these evils in the game, which are like the villain you play against, and each of that evil has its own prompt and storytelling flavor. Whereas like our current one that's like freely available, the Fiend, like very much like all the prompts are around like soft power, deception, intrigue, betrayal. So like we get to play kind of like in like we're adding constraints outside of like the regular Microscope seeing, but like we're creating opportunities where like as you said before, like we have a few different points, and then the players are, it's like seeing where like the line connects, the constellation of like between the constraints that like create these really interesting storytelling moments.
Something I touch on basically pretty much every episode is boundaries and constraints on projects, right? So we've talked a little bit about scope creep. We've talked a little bit about what you guys were able to do with the system, but early on, what were some of those boundaries and like clear signposts that you ventured too far that you may have established, or maybe times where you had to cut stuff?
I think we did a pretty good job not being over on this project, and I think that's a big.
Whoa.
I think I attribute that to coming from digital games. Like there's a really big focus on, hey, you need to get something that's playable and play it. When you're building a piece of software, it's like, okay, we're not going to get feedback on anything until there's a basic level created and you sit down and play. So I think the fact that like we had a very strong focus on this game of get the minimum level we needed to play the game, and then get 3 people on a call and play it. And to be honest, that playtest was rough.
Yeah.
It was not the greatest, and there was a lot of rough edges. But I think that let us start from a point of basically the minimum and expand upwards based off of player feedback, so that we never really were going off on crazy tangents, because we were always following like a breadcrumb trail of like what players like and like where they're having issues.
Yeah.
Well, when you have a very tight concept, right? Like we know that you're doomed, right? Similar to Hunt, right? Like there's a lot of narrative like conceit that you're introduced to at the front end of like, oh, I have to fall in line with this because this is that framework and I can't break outside of it. So it's like, I imagine in designing it, it's like, well, if this isn't about a huge progression system, this is a fight where they're going to die, right? There isn't any need to add mechanical bloat in the ability sense. It kind of sounds like you guys had a similar system to Hunt when it comes to like pairing the weapon and the type of knight. Is that how you're doing the characters? I remember you mentioning something to that effect.
Yeah, effectively it's the same. To create a hero, you have an origin and a calling. So your background and your class, and then you mix and match those.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so cool. And then those are the like subsects of prompt engine like that you get to engage with.
Correct.
That's so cool. I really like that way of getting to flavored prompts. Like I think that is really clearly part of like delivering a defined experience. What are some of your other big inspirations that drove into this game outside of hunt and like RPGs?
Yeah, I know James and I both have answers for this. For me, it's the first 10 minutes of The Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah.
When they do the
Yeah.
prequel, and they have this whole battle against this big bad, and then that clearly sets up the entire quest for Frodo and the Fellowship. So, for me, it's that and trying to capture that experience.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, for
about you,
me,
James?
it's the Exandria Unlimited Calamity one shot.
Oh yeah.
Where
Oh, it was so perfect.
I'm like, you have like, I think a lot of things for me design wise are like, okay, what's like a story that like I want to tell at my table,
Yeah.
and like okay, and like working backwards, like mechanically, how do I do that?
Yep.
And the Calamity one shot, I think it's fantastic for all of the fantastic performers that are there. But for someone who wants to kind of like feel that
Good luck.
experience, like there's not necessarily a script that you can kind of easily follow, and so the thought was like for Prequel, it's like, okay, like if you want to play and have that type of moment, like here is the scaffolding to kind of go do that.
I think it's a powerful way to play a game when you have that premise and the expectation of the experience at the forefront, like before you even play. At a separate interview, I had come up with the line that like Prequel is a state of mind as much as it is a game.
Yeah.
In that it's a very meta level when you're going in, you're like, we're all gonna die, but that doesn't limit you. It empowers you to make certain decisions.
Yep.
In service of the narrative that you otherwise wouldn't be doing. And to me, that's how I want to be playing games.
Yeah, well, and that's why indie games are so special, because like they, this is not the dunk on D&D party hour, but it could be. And like it's like you look at D&D and it says yes to so many types of play styles and storytelling and stuff that it lacks some of that clear touchstone and flavor that people sometimes need to be able to engage on the same level as one another. And so games like Prequel that have that set up, it allows people to kind of get into character or get into the mindset to understand the ethos of the game without necessarily knowing all of the rules. Because like, like you can make rules adjudication, on D&D stuff based on context, but it's still a ton, and there probably still is an actual rule for whatever you're deciding.
Yeah.
Whereas like so many of these smaller indie games, it's like, no, I understand what we're trying to do here. I know how some of these rules work, and we're going to make a call, and it doesn't matter, and it works better this way.
Coming from digital games, like we have an entire genre which are roguelikes, which are all play to lose games, and like coming to Prequel, I think players like they can be completely fine with a game they're going to lose, but like I think like one of the big things that we had to address in this game is like in the context of losing, like do players still feel like they have agency and choice, right? It's like I'm fine losing as long as I felt like I could do the best I could, like, and I had agency in how I lose or how bad I lose versus like the game just like taking a hammer and like smashing me down.
And that's one of those things I think in Prequel I like to joke, it gives you the fantasy of significance, right? That what the actions you do will matter.
It's not a fantasy. I'm
it will matter. It will matter. Yeah.
Well, it's nice because
awesome.
it's the difference between a railroad and having a destination, right? You can railroad your players, and they're probably going to complain about it, right? And rightfully so, because if you wanted to just tell a story, write a book. But like to have a destination in mind, the end, our failure, and how that sets up the world. You can go into your little Waze app, and you can choose a different different path to get there. You have agency through telling your story.
For something else, I was watching a presentation, by basically the OG World of Warcraft team, and they bring up a great point where it's like, when you make raids, why do we have to do mechanics? Like, why can't they just why isn't the boss just smart and run away? And it's like, well, as a game designers, we could think of a million ways to kill you. It's not hard. It's not a hard problem to solve.
Yeah.
We can do it. I can snap my fingers in the hand of God and I narrate that squishing you.
Yeah.
But that's not fun for me as the GM or the designer, and that's not fun as you as the player. It's creating a fun puzzle or a fun circumstance where it's I get to try and solve it, and I get to choose how I die and how I fit into the story I'm building.
Let's talk a bit about the Kickstarter, the rewards, options, the product itself, what you guys are doing and what people are backing when they get into this. Because I'm sold on the idea. What am I getting?
You can back it at a PDF level, and just get the digital version. Once we have that out, you can get it in the print version. So again, that's a digest half letter. It'll be a color interior and exterior. We're aiming for 48, 52 pages, so arguably on the larger side of zines.
Yeah.
And then further above that is, we offer discounts if you want to get 4 of them, to, have it all for your entire questing party. And then beyond that, there are just rewards to find ways to immortalize yourself or, your OC heroes, either in word or in art. So our highest tier is you can have some say into the heroes that show up in our last art pieces to be commissioned. So they will be immortalized in art.
Think I'm gonna steal
all
that.
legendary heroes are.
What point in development are you guys at? How far along are you?
On our Kickstarter page, we say we're about 95% written. And what does that mean? What's the last 5%? We have two evils left to be written. We have rough drafts, but they still need to be play tested. Game other than those 2 evils are completely written. A lot of it you can see in the preview packet, and now it's a lot of tweaking from play testing, and then we'll get that through editing, and then get the final pieces of art commissioned.
All the visual goodies that need to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you guys have got some pretty slick stretch goals here, from additional sheets to longer campaign stuff. I see a roguelike mode. That sounds pretty cool. And then another evil by Spencer himself. That's exciting.
Yeah, we'd love to have Spencer on the team to provide some of his Spencer magic.
Or
exactly.
see his own interpretation of our own interpretation of his game.
That's pretty crazy.
Very recursive.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Well,
thank you guys so much. This has been fascinating, and I cannot wait to see this game come into the world. I'm already such a huge fan of Hunt. DJ ran it right after we got it, and we played through it. I ran it again later, and I'm just like, this game is so freaking fun. But I love seeing other things using a similar format and being able to facilitate those kind of play experiences. So where can people find you guys outside of just the Kickstarter?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm most active on Blue Sky at ethanyen.com. That's also my website, where you can see all the past work I've done, and also on itch.
Find me at Google at Quigjam, Quigjam. I'm on Blue Sky, YouTube, Twitch, Substack, all under that name.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Listeners, please check out Prequel. I want to see all these stretch goals getting blown through because I want all of them. And I hope you guys take a look at their project, drop them a follow, and pay attention to what they're doing because it's very cool stuff. We are covering tons of stuff this month. February is very busy, and there's lots of cool stuff to check out. So make sure you're looking around. DJ and I both have projects that'll be live. I hope you guys are having a great Zine Month. We will see you all next time. Thank you both for joining us. And we'll see you guys next time on One Shots Tavern. You can find everything at oneshotstavern.com. And that's it for today.